And we see that in politicians today, they zigzag all the time. It's not that they really have ideals that they want to go by. That's En Melech Belo Am.
Wherever you get your podcasts from, or our own website, prismoftorah.com. This is the Prism of Torah with Reb Asaf Aharon Prisman. This week, Parshas Vayigash. You can join the royal family.
Shalom to everyone. I want to suggest and share with you a fascinating idea that has to do with this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayigash. As we know, the Parsha starts off, Vayigash elav Yehuda. Yehuda goes without any fear and goes to fight it out with Yosef. And he starts telling him, how can you do this to us? He starts saying the whole story that happened thus far, and he says, if you want, take me instead, but don't you dare take my brother Binyamin. At that point, the Midrash tells us that based on the Pasuk in Tehillim, the Pasuk is, Kine hamelachim no'adu, and the Midrash Rabbah on that Pasuk says, Ze Yehuda v'Yosef. And it continues to explain the Pasuk that it's referring to that Yehuda and Yosef were fighting it out, and from the other brothers' perspective, they viewed them as if, wow, these are true kings. They're melachim. We're going to sit it out and let them fight it out. We're not shayach to that. Anu ma'ich patlan. It's not us. It's for kings to fight out. Question number one. Okay, I can understand how they view Yosef as king. Indeed, he is second in command, in charge of probably the biggest empire at that point in time. However, Yehuda, how are they looking at Yehuda as a king? How do we know the Midrash tells us that after the whole episode with Yosef being sold and throwing him to the pit, etc., Yehuda was looked down upon by the brothers. If anything, he went down from his gadlus. So how come he's viewed as a king? That's question number one. Question number two, there's another midrash we're going to come to later that says that the reason Yehuda was zoiche to melucha, to kingship, is because of the whole Maaseh of Tamar that we know that he had after he was mezaneh with Tamar, but no one knew it was him. So she really deserved the death penalty, to be thrown into the fire. And Yehuda could have gone out of it without saying anything. But instead, he admitted to the truth, and he said, Hitzadka mimeni. Bischut that act of his, he deserved to get melucha. The question begs itself, okay, it was the right thing to do. It shows yashus and the midah of emes, but that's why he deserved to be king? So we will start off with trying to understand what is the geder, what is the definition of true kingship? The first thing that comes to mind when we think about being a king is, the king is in charge because he has slaves, he has servants, and they put upon the nation a certain type of fear, and therefore they do whatever the king says to do. However, this is one type of kingship. That's the type of kingship that Chazal tell us, Ein melech belo am. There isn't such a thing as a king without a nation. If the nation is not there to obey the king, then he loses the name being king. Because we see, even in our days, that when a nation starts rebelling against the king, then within days, he can lose his kingship. And this, by the way, this idea is brought down also by Rav Elchanan Wasserman and also by Rav Yisrael Misalant in different ways. We'll say one of the mashalim that's brought down by Rav Elchanan Wasserman, that it says in the Mishnah in Soita at the end, the last Mishnah of Soita, it says about Yemois HaMashiach, the days to come, when Mashiach is going to come, Pnei Hador ki Pnei HaKelev. The face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. So they both explain this idea that for a dog running as the owner's taking him, and the dog's always in front, but you're not realizing who's leading who. Is the dog leading the owner, the person taking him, or is the person in charge? The only time you really know what's going on is when they hit an intersection, and if the dog looks back at the owner to see where to go, right or left, then you know that really the owner's in charge. So too is what's going to happen in the end of days, before Mashiach will come, which we're already in those days, Ikvus de Mashiach, and we see this happening today, that what happens is, the leaders are not really doing what truly should be done, but rather they're looking back at the nation, and the nation can be upset at me if I do this. Are they going to be happy with me? So based on them is what I'm going to do. That be'emet en melech belo am, and that's what's going to be. That's pnei ador ki pnei hakelev. And we see that in politicians today, they zigzag all the time. It's not that they really have ideals that they want to go by. Rather, a lot of times, more often than not, they look back at the nation, okay, now my ideals will be this, now my ideals will be this. That's en melech belo am. However, true kingship is fakert. Despite what the nation's going to say, the king is going to do what's truthfully the right thing to do. This idea is spoken about in a very evident fashion in the Kuzari. In Ma'amar Shlishi, over there, the Kuzari, in his dialogue with the Chaver, says, okay, so please describe to me what a chassid is. What does the chassid do? So the Chaver answers back to him, a chassid bayas is someone that cares about his nation. He always does good for other people. He cares about what they need. He does whatever is righteous. He doesn't harm anyone. At that point, the Kuzari says back to the Chaver, I asked you about what a chassid is, an extra righteous person, not about what a moishel is, not someone that's like a dictator or in charge of a country. The Chaver answers him, don't you get it? Amar Chaver, ha-chassid hu mishehu moshel. It's just one of the same. A true dictator or a true person that leads a whole country is the same thing. That is what a chassid is. It starts off by being in charge of yourself. A person that can be moishel on himself, he can also moishel on a whole country. Whoever's moishel on his guf and nefesh and doesn't let his animalistic desires drive him to a certain place, like honor and kavod and whatnot, but rather he goes with what the true ideals are all about, based on what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do, that's a true chassid. That is one of the same. And over here we see the biggest concept, and that's a concept we want to bring home. The Arizal and others say that the word melech, mem lamed chaf, is actually Rashi Tevis, an acronym for moyach lev koved. The Arizal says the moyach is actually where the neshama dwells, which is in your head. That's where the moach is. That's where the neshama is, represents the moyach. That is the highest thing we possess. That's what differentiates between us and animals. Then you have the ruach. The ruach is our hearts, our emotions, representing the emotions. That's where the ruach resides. And then the kavod, the liver, represents the taivas that we have, that push us to do certain things more like an animal. That's where a nefesh, as we know, the nefesh is the most behema-like spiritual thing we have, which is called nefesh behemti. And a true king, the definition of a true king is a person that his neshama, i.e. his moyach, is moishel, and rules over and governs over his emotions and over his desires, animalistic desires. And that's what a true melech is. Ad kedei kach, this is brought down the halacha by the Kaf HaChaim, that a person should not eat a heart of another animal or a liver. I think Rabbeinu Bechai says the same thing. Not everyone agrees with this, but that's the Kaf HaChaim. I'm just showing you that it even trickles down to halacha, this deep spiritual idea. Reb Israel Miruzhin takes this even a step further. There's a famous Gemara, both in Brachos and Avodah Zarah, that says that Bilam was able to calculate precisely the moment HaKadosh Baruch Hu was angry, and at that time he was able to curse the Jewish people. Tosfos asks, I don't understand. In a millisecond, that's even less than a millisecond is the time Hashem gets angry. What can you already do exactly in that time period? So there's two answers. One answer of Tosfos is he could say one word that takes also almost like a millisecond to say, which is kaleim. Get rid of them. That's the simple pshat. But al derech hasoid, Rabbi Yisrael Miruzhin wants to say a fabulous pshat. He says, if you look carefully in the Tosfos, he tried to do kaleim. Kaleim is the same letters like melech. It's just exactly the opposite way around. He knew that Bnei Yisrael, their koyach, and that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of us, is to first follow our moyach, and that should be in charge of our emotions, of our leiv, and also of our kavod, of our liver. But rather, Bilam, who was exactly the opposite, and he always went with his animalistic drives, his taivas, he wanted Bnei Yisrael to be like that. That's why he said kaleim. Al derech hasoid, kaleim is first kavod. First go based on your liver, your animalistic desires. Then your emotions, leiv, and only last should be your neshama, your moyach. And on that, Zokt Tosfos only in Avodah Zarah, he says, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu switched that to become a bracha. As Bilam switched it to a bracha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu switched what Bilam's curse to a bracha, as it says in Bamidbar Kaf Gimel Kaf Aleph, Utwas Melech Boy. Switch the letters from Kolim, you get Melech. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, Bnei Yisrael will be like this. They'll go based on the Moyach. And that is a true definition of a king. A king is someone that is able to control everything by his mind. That means, despite the fact you have emotions and animalistic drives, taivas, you channel them the right way based on your Moyach. No matter what happens, your Moyach is in control. And that is a true Moishel. Where do we see this? Even in the past generations, we saw this in Gedolei Ador all the time. We saw this by Reb Chaim Kanievsky, when his wife, Rabbanit Kanievsky Alei Shalom, she passed away on Shabbos, even though he was so close to her and it pained him so much. He didn't show any emotions because halachically one should not during Shabbos. He waited to Motzei Shabbos, and right then and there he burst down in tears. That's an unbelievable control that he had because his moyach was in charge of everything. So too we see Rav Ovadia Yosef Zatzal. There's a whole long story we have here. It's in our children's book. It's a known story that he has to undergo some procedure. He wasn't feeling well and they were worried that he had some sort of a condition. And the only way to do a check for that condition, he had to put him totally under general anesthetic. But he heard the doctors whisper that and he said, under no circumstances am I doing that. I'll rather learn during this time and I'll figure out to not think about it. The doctors say, you're crazy. It's impossible. There's no way you could do such a thing. Even a young person, he wasn't young at the time, even a young person he'll faint from the pain. But yes, he was able to control his moyach and put himself in a sugya that he was learning at the time, and he didn't even realize when the procedure was over. I'll call upon him, bring it home to us. With this we can answer our questions, because this is exactly what the brothers were in awe by looking at Yehuda and Yosef. Yosef, it's not only because he was literally acting as a second-in-command king in Mitzrayim. It's a lot more than that. Yosef, the Midrash tells us that Yosef deserved everything he got because he worked so hard and didn't let what Eshet Potiphar's, what she tried to do and seduce him. Ad kedei kach that there's a Midrash that really literally goes step by step with everything that he got. Just like his mouth didn't kiss an Avera, so too it says in the Pasuk, Al pi vishak davar. Whatever he says will happen in Mitzrayim. And then the Midrash Rabbah goes further to say, Gufo shelo naga be'avera, his body had never touched an Avera, it deserves to have this special type of clothing. Vayilbash oiso bigdei shesh. His neck, tzavaro shelo yirchin la'avera, never bowed down to any Avera. Vayasem revit zahav al tzavaroi. And it goes on to say even his hands that didn't touch an Avera. Vayaser HaMelech tabato me'al yado, and he gave his ring, the king's ring, vayne al yad Yosef. And so it goes on, but you see Yosef, despite the fact he had such nisyonos, he was always able to overcome there with his moyach, showing a true sign of royalty. We see the same in Yosef in two other cases. One is, you see throughout this Parsha and last week's Parsha, he wasn't able to hold himself back almost. He already wanted to tell the brothers, I'm your brother, but no, he had a whole cheshbon that he wanted their sin to be atoned, and hence he had a whole plan. I'm not going to tell them it's me until I see how much they fight for me. And that's what he did. He was able to be in control based on true values, not based on what people are going to say. Ad kedei kach, that he realized that the Yehuda and the brothers might kill him. But yet he said, I'm willing to take that risk. A calculated risk, not out of pressure, calculated risk. He told everyone to leave, and only then he confessed to the brothers who he is, because he didn't want to embarrass them, despite the fact he was taking a risk of being killed. That is true leadership, true kingship, true royalty. The same we see by Yehuda. Now we can understand. He was in control. He could have easily told everyone, what is this? What did Tamar do? Just kill her, throw her to the fire. That's what she deserves to get. But no, he was in control of himself. And that's why he deserved to be a melech, to have melucha come from him. Even in the spheres, we know, just like Avraham represents chesed, Yitzchak, Gvura, Yaakov, Tiferes, Yosef represents Yesoid. The outcome of Yesoid, Ateres HaYesoid for those who know, the outcome of Yesoid is melucha. Yosef is Yesoid, and Yehuda is melucha, for the reasons we've just described, because they personify this idea of true royalty, of having your moyach, your neshama, in charge of your emotions, of how you act based on your emotions, that you don't let the emotions drive you, but you're moyach driven, you're neshama driven. That's what they both possessed, and that's why Yehuda is melucha, Malchus, the last Sphira, and Yosef is the Asoid. And that's why in the days to come, Mashiach will come. There'll be Mashiach ben David, which is from Yehuda, we know, and Mashiach ben Yosef, which will be coming from Yosef, of course, because they show this true sign of royalty. Perhaps this also answers the question why Talmidei Chachamim in the Gemara in several places, in Gittin and other places, they're referred to as Malachim, angels, because angels represent this idea. They are in charge and driven by their moyach, by the neshama, yiratzon, that will be able to mimic this idea and join the family of royalty by behaving and conducting ourselves in a manner like every yid should be, which is that our moyach will be in control, i.e. our neshama will be in control of our ruach and nefesh side. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you for joining us. This is the Prism of Torah. Visit our website, prismoftorah.com, where you'll find a full archive of hundreds of past Divrei Torah. Subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and don't forget to share with your friends and family. Sponsorship opportunities are available for all of our episodes. Thank you, Yona Vefa, for your recording equipment. Produced by Eli Podcast Productions.